Okay, perfect. We are live. I'm also going to pin David to the screen so that everybody can see him. There we go. All right, I'm pumped for tonight, and for several reasons. A, because this is a topic that is really exciting to me, and that I think a lot of people can benefit from learning. And it's one of those scenarios where far more of us are probably going through different waves in our life in which we require an internal need to build more whole being resilience. And sometimes that can be really hard to do just on your own without knowing some practical principles on how to do so. Where that comes in is guidance from a professional. The second reason why I am so excited for tonight is that our good friend Dylan, he's like one of the original members of the Impetus Cadre, has brought us his father David, who I've met before and have only heard the best stories about. And so trust me, David, he talks so highly of you. He is so proud to have you in his life, and he is so grateful for you. So don't ever doubt the way that Dylan feels about you, because the way that he shares his perspective of you is nothing but positives. And for us to get a glimpse of that tonight is truly an honor. Dave, I know things have been pretty crazy the last couple of years for you because you're balancing a full-time job at HP, and you've been going through the whole long process of getting your schooling done to become a counselor, and you just finished your 1,000-hour internship. So you're more than qualified to talk to us about this tonight. And I know you've put together a pretty stellar presentation, and that's already been presented to HP. They gave you the opportunity to do this. So for us to also have this opportunity is really humbling. I'll turn the time over to you. Do what you will. If you want to have a discussion-based, lecture-based, it is completely your time. Just appreciate you being here with us.
Well, thanks, Tanner. I appreciate it. And it is a pleasure for me to be here. This is something that I have been involved with for probably well over 35 years. This really started back when I was in college with this book. I don't even know if you can even find it anymore. But this was a book that kind of started it, plus had a professor that went along with it. And let me share my presentation and then we'll get into it. Okay, can you all see that?
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, so I'll just give you a little more background than what Tanner shared. So I have a master's, I have an MBA that I got about 13 or 14 years ago. And then I've just completed everything for my master's in counseling with a focus in couple, marriage, and family. Everything is done. I'm just now waiting for the official certificate. Part of that program is that I had to do a minimum of 1,000-hour internship where I'm working directly with clients. So 400 of those hours had to be direct with clients. 600 was indirect work. I've actually done more than 1,000 because I had several clients that wanted to go with me. So I was actually done with my hours back in about June, but I continued with my clients to make sure that they had continuous care until I got licensed. Right now I'm on pause while I'm getting licensed. I'll be a licensed counselor in February, beginning of February. So my emphasis was in couple, marriage, and family. I also have an emphasis in grief and trauma, and I have an emphasis in acceptance and mindfulness informed therapy. That acceptance and mindfulness informed therapy is going to be kind of an underpinning on what I'm going to share tonight. I have years of experience in learning and development. So I started in learning and development. I started with a company, Franklin Covey. Some of you may know it. They are the 7 Habits folks. I was a certified trainer for 7 Habits. I also did custom training for external clients like Discover Card and Rush Pharmaceuticals and others. I've been with HP for 26 years now. I am a senior manager. I manage a team of about 90 people. that covers a function here in North and South America. So I've been a leader, coach, and mentor within HP for well over 12 of those 26 years. In my internship, I did a stint at an addiction recovery facility. One of the things that I really wanted to work with was families that have a mood personality or a substance use disorder within the family, because that's really hard for the family to be able to work and be a loving supporter of somebody that's struggling with one of those. So that's what I've really been focusing on as I go through this program. There's just a couple notes I would like to make before I begin. So if you are experiencing mental health challenges, I would encourage you to seek out a caring professional to help guide you to well-being. This will give you some foundational principles of what you can do. But for instance, if you're working with depression, some of the ideas that I'm sharing with you, if you try to put them into your to-do list, can actually make things worse rather than make things better. So if you're having some of those struggles, I would really encourage you to seek out a caring professional that can help you in that journey to wellness. And then the other one is, don't take everything that I present and make this great big long to-do list and tomorrow go out and just start trying to bang out everything, because it will be counterproductive. And I'll talk a little more about that. So those are just a couple provisions that I would make up front. So first of all, I'd like to just talk about what resilience is. And this can be as interactive as you want it to be. You can pause me if you have questions, if you want to discuss a concept or an idea. This time is yours. I have, the concepts that I'll be presenting, but you can pause me at any time, and then at the end, I'll make sure that, I'm here for any questions that you want to follow up on, because these concepts are going to kind of build on each other. So I'm going to go through concepts, then I'll go through a framework, and then I'll go through some things that you can implement if it sounds right to you. So with resilience, building resilience really expands our window of tolerance. You can see this diagram here, this optimal arousal, that's our window of tolerance. And sometimes our window of tolerance can actually be quite narrow. For some people that have went through a lot of trauma, for people that maybe are dealing with major depressive disorder, their window of tolerance can be quite narrow. And if you're going through some really difficult times, for instance, maybe you've lost a family member, that window of tolerance can shrink. So what resilience really is it's finding ways to expand that window of tolerance that you can stay within. So there's your optimal arousal window, and then above that window is hyperarousal, and this is when you become emotionally dysregulated. This is where you turn into, you can see anxiety coming up really strong, anger, you can get overwhelmed. You've probably heard this a lot, the fight-flight response. So you either want to fight or you want to run away from it. So that's what can really show up in the hyperarousal state. And then in the hypoarousal state, that's where you get freeze and fawn. Fawn may be a new one for you. Freeze is where you kind of play dead. Fawn is where you actually are like, what can I do? What can I do to make this better? This is where the people pleaser shows up, really trying to do whatever it can to help the other person emotionally regulate. You're trying to emotionally regulate the other person. This can turn into shutdown, withdrawal, depression, shame, and you can become passive if you're in the hypoarousal state. Some people can tend to spend more time in hyperarousal. They try to they can get really triggered into those really strong emotions. Some people will overregulate. They will suppress their emotions. And what suppressing emotions is really like is if you were to take a beach ball and you go out in the pool and you take that beach ball and you shove it underneath the water and you hold it down, what happens when you release that beach ball? Not only does it pop to the surface, but it's actually going to go past the surface. It's going to pop way above the surface. And that's what happens when we suppress our emotions. We can shove them down. It takes a lot of energy to keep them down. And then something happens and boom, that emotion comes out even bigger than it was. It pops above the surface. So that can be something that we struggle with when we do this over-regulation of our emotions. And something that's really common in our North America culture is what they call normalized male alexithymia. That just rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it? But what that really means is that as males, we are taught from a very young age, shake it off, big boys don't cry, suck it up, get back in the game. It comes from our parents, it comes from our peers, it comes from other adults, it comes from our coaches, where we are taught as males not to feel. That's what alexithymia is we become disconnected from our feelings. Now, in the business environment, this can show up with women as well, because in a business environment, a man can show up a certain way and he's called passionate. If a woman shows up the same way, she's called something very different, right? And so women are taught in the workplace, don't feel, don't express, you know, and so that can show up for them as well, that they start to suppress those emotions and they can become somewhat disconnected in the workplace as well. So that's something that we're really paying attention to, is really bring us back into being connected with our emotional state, and also being aware of the emotional state of the other people that we're interacting with. We have what's called mirror neurons, which means we mirror what the other person is doing, or the other person can mirror us. So if we're dealing with somebody who's in a hyperarousal state, they're demonstrating anger, they're coming across really aggressive, sometimes we will raise up to become hyperaroused and we'll become counter-aggressive with them. You can do the opposite. If you can stay in that optimal arousal window, even though they're in the hyperarousal, sometimes you can pull them down and have them mirror you. So if you can stay calm, have a calm voice, sometimes even lowering your voice, talking a little softer, putting a little more space between your words, that changes the temperature, and they can start to mirror you. So where they're speaking really, really rapid, they're being very aggressive, but you're staying calm, you're lowering your voice, talking a little softer, they potentially will mirror you. If not, you can say, you know, I've really noticed that this is really an emotionally charged conversation. So let's take a moment and maybe come back to it in 20 minutes, or maybe come back to it in an hour, or maybe come back to it tomorrow. So then you get people back into that optimal arousal window, because that is where your full brain is engaged. And I'll talk more about how our brain kind of has these two big divisions within it. So now coming into resilience, this is where I'm talking about this whole being resilience. A lot of times when we talk resilience, we're really talking about the emotional side of the mind. And I look at it from a whole being. It is a mind, body, spirit approach to resilience. And so I'll give you some examples of that. So on the mind side, we're talking about cognition, thinking, and we're talking about emotion. Something that makes us different from other animals is our awareness, our consciousness, our imagination, and our creativity. So that's something that's unique to us as humans. On the body side, we have our physiology, we have the nervous system, and two parts of our nervous system that I'll talk about is our sympathetic nervous system and our parasympathetic nervous system. So our sympathetic nervous system is what gets charged up in the fight-flight response. The parasympathetic is what we would call the rest and digest. The sympathetic has a real big purpose, okay? If you're out exercising, if you're running from a bear, you don't want to be in rest and digest. You want to be in that fight-flight mode, okay? If I'm lifting weights, if I'm running, I want my sympathetic system charged up. That's where my adrenaline's coming from. That's where cortisol's coming from. I need that going on in my body to get the full benefit out of my exercise. But if I'm still charged up like that when I'm at rest, then my body isn't getting this time to recover, and it can have very detrimental effects on us. So also within the body, that's where our sensations are. So we have our emotions, but our emotions are also attached to sensations. That's why we call them feelings. And then we have movement and action, and we have embodiment. On the spirit side, I'm not talking religion. For some people, religion and religious rituals is a way that they bring spirit in, but spirit is meaning and purpose, it's connection, it's values, it's transcendence, inner essence, and it's awe. And I'm going to talk really about the awe part of it. It's what can we do that can inspire this feeling of awe. It can be going for a walk in nature and seeing the beauty of our world around us, and just be in awe of the world that we live in. It can be seeing a beautiful sunset. For me, not too long ago, I was in a hospital in New Mexico. My brother was in an accident, and I was watching this elderly couple, and I was watching the husband care for the wife in helping guide her through the hospital. And that inspired a sense of awe in me of how wonderful that was, that man was taking care of his wife. And so that's another thing that can inspire awe. And according to Shauna Shapiro in her book, Good Morning, I Love You, she said, the latest research suggests that awe leads to a wide range of benefits, from happiness, improved relationships, and greater generosity to increased humility and critical thinking. It also leads to better health and helps stave off chronic illness. One study that found that people who reported feeling awe, wonder, and amazement that day had lower levels of inflammation and illness. Research also shows that awe can help us think critically and sharpen our brains. It's when we feel inspired, not judged or shamed, that we find our peak performance. So this feeling of awe is really important in the overall part of our whole being resilience. And they've also found that people who don't have some kind of a spiritual part of their life have a higher incidence of major depressive disorder. So having this spirit side can help you with the emotional side. And I'm going to talk about a couple of things later on, but one is mindfulness, and mindfulness will have a whole being benefit to you. It has spiritual aspects to it, it has mental aspects to it, and it has physical aspects to it. So I'll share that with you. Another one that is really, really simple is going for a walk. And we can think, well, a walk is not a big deal, right? But actually a walk is a wonderful thing for you. A walk, one, is exercise. And part of exercise, they found that when we contract a muscle, we release something called myokines. They call it the hope molecule. And what it does is it actually releases these myokines that help us with our mental state. So it can improve our mood. The other thing that it does is when we walk, because we're moving side to side, it has bilateral stimulation. A trauma therapy called EMDR is bilateral stimulation. Maybe some of you have heard of the butterfly hug, where you pat yourself on the shoulder like this to calm yourself down. That's bilateral stimulation. So walking stimulates bilateral stimulation, which can help you to regulate your emotions. It can help you to improve your mood. If you're going for a walk and you're getting this sense of awe, maybe you see this beautiful sunset, then it stimulates that spiritual side of you as well. If you go for a walk with somebody you love, then you're also stimulating that connection with that person. So like one of the best things for me is to go for a walk with my wife. I'm holding her hand. I'm getting the bilateral stimulation. I'm getting the exercise. I'm getting the connection to my wife. There can be a beautiful sunset. My wife is much better at noticing the beauty around me, so she'll point it out to me. Hey, did you notice that? Did you see that? And so that helps to bring in that sense of awe to me. So that's a good example, right, of whole being resilience. I'll give you an example that wasn't so positive. So about a little over 4 years ago, I was training for my 3rd marathon. And as I trained, I kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I have a watch. I'm a data guy, so I was tracking my recovery, and my recovery sucked. Instead of me recovering with an hour or 2 of the run, I wouldn't recover until evening. And so I thought, you know, I probably should go get myself checked out. And I went and visited my cardiologist, found out that I had 3 blockages in my heart. And a week later, I was in for double bypass surgery. The blessing was I never had a heart attack, never damaged my heart, but I was able to find the problem and resolve it before it became something more major. I was eating right, I was exercising, I was managing my risk. There was one thing that I wasn't doing very well, and that was I wasn't managing my stress. So that stress was showing up in my body. It was creating an inflammation response. What happens is when you study what happens in heart blockages, a lot of it has to do with inflammation repair. And so stress was one of the things that I was not managing well. That's when I started a mindfulness practice, and it's made a tremendous difference to me. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to teach you a hand model to the brain. So if you take your hand and hold it up, okay, and you look right here in your hand, this would be considered the brain stem in your hand. What the brain stem does is they call it the survival brain. This is what regulates your breathing, runs your heart, does all of that. That's the first part of the brain that actually it is created. So when a baby is in womb, the brain stem is the first part of the brain that that develops. And then the next part, moving up right into here, if you were to tuck your thumb across, this part right here is your limbic system. This is your emotional brain, okay? And then if you were to take and wrap your fingers around the top of it, so it kind of looks like a fist, okay? This here is your thinking brain up here. And this right here, your fingernails, this is a part of your thinking brain that integrates everything, right? So it's the integrator that integrates everything that's going on. Some things to keep in mind about the brain is this part is automatic. This part here works very, very fast. It uses less energy than the thinking part. And this is the part that this in the brainstem is what's engaged when you see, like if you were out in the wild and you saw a bear, okay, this part jumps in and you're running and climbing a tree before this part of the brain even comes online and says, oh, that's a bear. I wonder if it's dangerous. If you were running out of this part of your brain, when you saw the bear, you'd probably be eaten before you realized that it was a threat. So this part works really, really fast. This part works slow. This part low energy. This part high energy, uses a lot of energy up here. This part is, instead of it saying, if A plus B plus C is true, then do Z, it says if A or B or C is present, do Z. That's how it moves so fast. The thinking part of the brain is the part where logic comes in and goes, if A plus B plus C is present, then do Z, right? So going back to the arousal window, when we're in the optimal arousal window, this is fully working. Your limbic system, your emotional part of your brain is present and working, and your thinking part of your brain is working. When you go into hyper arousal, this part of your brain goes offline, okay? So you're fully running out of your limbic system. You're fully running out of emotion. And it takes about 20 minutes for this to come back online. So that's, remember when I said, can we come back to this in 20 minutes? That's about how much time it takes for this to reset and for your thinking brain to come back into place, okay? And there's things that you can do to make that happen a little faster. Mindfulness is one of them. But that's kind of a way you can look at your brain. And this is like, we call this flipping your lid, okay? Your thinking brain has gone offline. So you want to bring it back because you want your whole brain. We are taught that our emotional brain is bad. It is not. It is a wonderful thing. That's where your motivation comes out of. So you really want the emotional brain there. That's where your big why is at. And so you want the whole brain showing up. So another concept is what we call negativity bias. And negativity bias, that's the survival mechanism that gives more weight and attention and emotional intensity to negative experiences. So we weight a negative experience 2 to 4 times higher than a positive experience. And why it happens, okay, so in here in your emotional brain, there's a little walnut-shaped thing called the amygdala. And the amygdala is the threat response system. That's what triggers everything. Okay, and so the amygdala gets triggered, and that's what kicks off the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. It's also our brains are like Velcro for bad, and we're like Teflon for positive, for good. So the bad sticks really, really well, and the good just kind of slips off, right? And so I'll talk about how we address that. And then, you know, we have this aversion to loss. And so that's why we put the heavier weight on the negativity to the positive. And then we reinforce all of this through rumination. So just to ask you a question, so if all of you can give me an answer, how long do you think an emotion lasts?
5 minutes.
5 minutes? Okay.
Throwing something out there.
Yeah, I've never been asked this before. I've never even thought about it. I guess my brain wants to think that it varies based on the feeling that I have. And I'm going to guess that it's, well, I don't know. I want to guess that it's shorter, but we feel it for longer. I'll go 3 minutes with the idea that we actually feel it or it lingers for longer.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say 15 minutes. But I feel like it's probably, but I feel like it's probably shorter.
A lot of you are worried that I'm giving you a trick question, huh?
It is a trick. It is a trick question, I'm sure. I'm going to go even less than Tanner and go between 30 and 60 seconds. But like we definitely feel it a little bit longer.
Dylan, so what's the correct answer?
I don't know, but I'm saying 20 minutes.
I'm going 10.
Zach's a little bit of a ringer. So it's 1 to 2 minutes. 1 to 2 minutes. And what that is that's the chemical response. So that's when our brain triggers the chemical response within the brain. And if nothing happens within 1 to 2 minutes, it will pass. Okay. The problem that comes in where we can say, well, it feels like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, a whole day, is because we don't let that chemical reaction finish out and settle down. We trigger it again with a response. So going back to that rumination, we reinforce it with rumination, and we trigger that response again. So we trigger the emotion, and boom, it sends all these chemicals out in your brain again, and it goes on longer, and then it'll start to subside, and boom, we trigger it again. And so the longer we sit there and we think about it, we're actually prolonging the feeling of the emotion because we keep re-triggering the chemical reaction in our brain. But if we can stop and just pause, then in 1 to 2 minutes, it will pass. Okay. And that's the hard part, right? If it was easy, we'd all be doing that, right? So that's just something to keep in mind. Another concept is what we call the reticular activating system. And what this does is this regulates our arousal, this regulates our alertness, this regulates attention, and this regulates our wake and sleep cycle. If this system actually gets damaged, we can actually go into a coma. So this is a very, very important system for us. And you've probably noticed this system in action when you go and you're looking for a new car, and you find a particular car and you find it in a particular color, and then as you're driving around, suddenly you start noticing cars that are that same make, model, and color, right? So I went and picked out a red Ford Explorer years ago for my wife. I had never paid attention to red Ford Explorers, and suddenly I was seeing red Ford Explorers everywhere. And so that's our reticular activating system, is we are telling it, I want you to pay attention to this. And so it broadens what it does. If you've noticed on social media how it pays attention to what you watch, and then suddenly it starts filtering things down, and suddenly everything is showing up that you like, and stuff that you don't like doesn't show up. That's an algorithm that's very similar to our reticular activating system, is we get this filter in place that starts to filter out. So we get selective attention and meaning making, and it's affected by our arousal state. So hyperarousal, it's going to over open the gate and everything feels urgent, and that's when we start to feel anxiety. And hypoarousal will close the gate, and that's where we'll start to feel depression, numbing, fog, fatigue. That's where those can show up. And so the reticular activating system is the brain's attention gate, and the negativity bias is the priority rule. So the negativity bias says, this is what I want you to pay attention to. So it gives the rule to the RAS, and then the RAS starts filtering everything based on those rules. And so our perspective can get more and more limited, right? And so we want to pay attention to the RAS, and we want to find ways that we can expand the RAS. So let me talk about the negativity bias, and let me talk about the RAS just for a moment. So here's some things that you can do to help with the RAS, and that is that you start your day by intention priming. Okay, so what you want to do is tell the RAS what you want it to pay attention to. So negativity bias is going to be your default, and it's going to look for everything that is going to keep you safe. Our brains are designed to keep us safe. They are not designed for success, they're designed for safety. So we have to take over the programming of our brains to help the brain start driving us towards success. So starting your day off with intention priming, and you can give it phrases like, you can say, what wonderful thing is going to happen to me today? And now you've told your brain, pay attention and see what magical thing happens today. So you can give it some priming through intention in the morning. You can also help it through movement and breath. So you can, any kind of moderate exercise, breathing, so slow nasal breathing can optimize arousal. And, you know, it's not going to move you up into hyper or hypo, it's going to get you back into that optimal window. Sleep is huge. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're getting your sleep and your circadian rhythm is right, but also light exposure will also help with the arousal. And then any kind of a mindfulness micro practice can help with this as well. 2 to 5 minutes of sensory grounding, so any of your 5 senses can help you to expand your sensory perception with it. Okay, and the other thing that you want to do to counteract the negativity bias, remember I said that positive experiences are like Teflon, they slide off. When you have a positive experience, pause, feel it, experience it, record it, spend time with it so that you can record it. Emotion is one of the greatest things that we have to solidify a memory. And so the more emotion we can put with it, spend time with it, the more we put that into the brain as something to look at. So instead of just the negative stuff, we've also got the positive stuff. So we're starting to give our brain some options of what to look at.
David, real quick, looks like we had a question from Noah. Noah, do you still have that question top of mind?
Yeah, it wasn't super important. I was just curious if the whole 1 to 2 minute thought process is applicable with like any kind of addiction, and trying to like reverse that addiction and reverse that. You were saying how it only lasts 1 to 2 minutes, but we keep reinforcing that so it keeps lasting longer. So if someone's trying to get out of an addiction or a habit and kind of reform that, is that something you can kind of reverse and think about?
Yeah. So in addiction, we have what's called we've called urge surfing. Okay, so you surf the urge until it passes. And with addiction, so let me just talk about addiction for a minute. With addiction, there are those that feel like addiction is a moral failing. We're not strong enough, so we give into addiction. And I do not subscribe to that idea. What I subscribe to, and this is based on my experience in working with addiction, is most people go into addiction for one of two reasons. And it's primarily the first one. The first one is to escape or relieve themselves from an uncomfortable feeling. So they're trying to escape a feeling. The other reason is to enhance a feeling. Now, the problem with addiction, if you're using a substance or something to enhance a feeling, is what happens is that suddenly, I'll take a substance, for instance. You take a substance, and when you use that substance, it enhances the feeling. But then along with that, suddenly you start to get a dependence on it. So our body regulates. So if we're using, let's say that I use meth and it stimulates dopamine, what the body does is it down regulates. So you have if I have two synapses in my brain, like my fists, dopamine passes from one synapses to the other. And so one is releasing it and one is receiving it. Down regulating means that the receiver goes, there's too much dopamine, and it starts shutting off the reception sites. So then the other one has to release more dopamine to get the same feeling. And so you have to up the substance to be able to get the same feeling. So you start upping it, right? And that's where you get the dependence in it. And then when you don't have the substance, then you feel like crap. So then you start using the substance not to enhance a feeling, but you're using the substance to quit feeling like crap. And so it can take you over to the other side where you're trying to avoid a feeling. So in looking at addiction through that lens, is I'm trying to avoid a feeling. So what you want to do is learn to be able to surf the feeling you're trying to avoid and allow the urge to be present and be okay with it, and then it will pass. And so if you give it enough time, the urge will pass. So yeah, it can be used for addiction. If you are heavily into addiction, then you probably you need to go to a facility to detox, particularly with alcohol. If you try to detox with alcohol on your own and you have severe alcohol dependence, it can be life-threatening. So I would just keep that in mind. Does that help, Noah?
Yeah, no, that was awesome. Between a lot of people that I know, ranging anywhere from a social media addiction to alcoholism or something like that, you just made me think about how you could reverse a cool concept like that, so that when you're in the moment, you can say, this is a feeling that I'm having, embrace it, but don't act on it and keep allowing that to repeat itself.
A great book is The Craving Mind by Judson Brewer. And that goes through all of the different kinds of addictions: substance addiction, process addictions. So process addiction would be pornography, gambling, but it can also show up. We can get addicted to social media. We like that thumbs up. We like the heart that gives us a dopamine rush. And suddenly we're spending more time paying attention to whether we're getting thumbs up and hearts than we are actually living the experience that we're putting out on social media. We can become addicted to love. Love can become an addiction for us. So I would highly recommend, if you're interested, the book, The Craving Mind by Judson Brewer.
I love it.
All right, so here's another concept, and this is where I'd like to get into to our true self. So when you look at a young child, you'll see these kind of attributes that show up in a young child. And this is a young child that is growing up in an environment that is not subject to adverse life events. Okay, if you take a child that has either had some really adverse events during time in the womb, or they're born into adverse life events, this won't necessarily be completely true. But if you look at a child in a natural, loving, supportive environment, you'll see the child be very curious. You'll see the child be confident. You'll see the child be very authentic. I love seeing a kid that just tells you how it is. I have a birthmark up on my head, and a kid will walk up to me and go, "What happened to your head?" And you see the color just drain out of the parent's face because they don't know how I'm going to react to it. I don't react. I think it's cool that this kid is so authentic that they can say that. But kids are very authentic. They can be calm, you know, but they can also be very energetic. You'll see it compassionate. Have you ever seen one baby start to cry and then another baby will start to cry? Or you'll see one child get hurt and another child goes over and starts to soothe them. They have this natural compassion with them and empathy. They're very connected to their parents and the loved ones around them, and they can be very courageous and creative. My oldest boy, he was so courageous, he would go do things that just scared the bejeebus out of me. He would jump off of really high heights when he was really little because he had this courageous side of him. He would run right to the deep end of the pool, right? And so as a parent, I'm trying to control that, and so I taught him some fear to balance out his courageous, which I wish I'd chose a different way to do that. But when you look at kids, you see this natural state, and this is our natural state. This is who we truly are underneath it all. But as we go through life, then, you know, we start to have some things that start to shape our self-identity. So we'll start to have thoughts that show up. And these thoughts can be affirming thoughts, or these thoughts can be unsupported thoughts. We start to have emotions show up. We start to have labels, you know, maybe we were told we were smart, or we were stupid, we were ugly, or we were good looking. And sometimes even positive labels can be limiting. I was told that I was smart growing up. I had glasses, so everybody thought I was smart. So I'm like, I'm smart. But it became limiting because I wouldn't do anything that made me look stupid because I didn't want to lose my smart label. So even positive labels can be limiting at times. We get narratives. We get these stories that people tell us, or we get stories that we tell about ourselves. And then these start to create beliefs. And as you can see, these emotions, narrative, beliefs, labels, and thoughts, they covered up what our true self-identity is, that compassion, that curiosity, that empathy, that creativity. It all gets lost because of these emotions. So I live in Boise, and in Boise, we live in a valley that's surrounded by mountains. And so in the winter, we get what's called an inversion. You may even get it in Utah as well. But the skies just get extremely gray. And you look out and you're like, I don't see the sun, I don't see the sky. But if you go up to Bogus Basin, which is a ski resort that's up above the city, you get up above it and suddenly you're up above the clouds and it's sunny and it's blue sky and it's beautiful. It's the same thing with us. We can get to believe that we are our thoughts, emotions, beliefs, labels, and narratives. And we start to say, I am these things. And it covers up who we truly are. And your self-identity is really, really important because your self-identity is like the thermostat in your house. Your thermostat will only let the house get so warm or so cold before it will adjust. And your self-identity will do the same thing. So if you do any actions that are above or below your self-identity, it will correct. It'll allow you to do it for a little while and then it'll correct. So if you're trying to create some habit that is way outside of your self-identity, it's really, really hard, and it will start to pull that down. Okay. Now, if you stay with the habit long enough, it can start to lift your self-identity. but it's really getting in touch with our self-identity and who we really are. So I want to go through a framework with you, and you can all come off mute because I want you to talk to me on this. So I have a bear, and this bear sees his favorite food. What is that bear going to do if it sees its favorite food?
Head towards it.
Yeah, go get it.
Okay. All right. So it's going to head towards its food and loves its salmon. But that bear encounters something in its way. It encounters a hiker or a hunter. What's that bear going to do?
Feel threatened.
Okay. And so when it feels threatened, what's it going to do?
Go into attack mode.
That's one of its responses. It can go into fight mode, right? It could also run. Okay. So it's going to go away from either fight, flight, freeze, hide mode to get away. So it's going to go away. We're very much like this. We have things that we will move towards because they're really important to us, that we really enjoy, that we really want, and we will move away from things that are uncomfortable, that are unsafe. And so we follow a very similar pattern. Now, there's something different about us than about the bear, okay? So if I was looking at the bear, I can see that what the bear is doing. I can see it going towards, or I can see it going away, okay? So I can experience that bear through my 5 senses. And so us, like the bear, we have these 5 senses. But the bear really is running out of instinct, whereas we have an inner world with us that the bear didn't have. Remember when I was talking about the whole being, and we have creativity and we have self-awareness. So we have that the bear doesn't have. And within that, we have these emotions, we have these thoughts, we have these beliefs, all of those things that I just talked about. So that is our internal world. And so this is really how a framework that we can look at for ourselves. And within this framework, we are the ones that are aware. So we have this awareness that we can see the things that we want. We can see the things we want to avoid. We can experience our external world, and we know, hopefully, somewhat of our internal world. Something that's really important with this as well is you can't be in your external world and your internal world at the same time. Have you ever driven home and pulled into your driveway and realized that you don't remember any of the turns you made, any of the stops you made, because you were caught up in your head the whole time you were driving? I had this experience. We moved during COVID, and I was working from home, and I had to go into the office. And on the way home, we had built a new home. I drove in and pulled up into the driveway of my old house because I was in automatic mode and I wasn't paying attention, right? So we can get so caught up in our internal world that we're not paying attention to our external world. When you're going someplace new, you're paying very much attention to your external world. Oh, I have to turn here. You got your Google Maps or your Apple Map saying, turn in 500 feet. And so it's keeping you very engaged with your external world. You're watching, you're listening, you're paying attention to the cars around you. So you're not so much in your internal world. And so this is something to keep in mind as I'm going to go into mindfulness. So then looking at this framework, down in the lower right-hand side, our internal world and the things that are important to us, then we look at identifying who or what matters to you. So these are your values. This is your purpose. This is your connection. Okay. This is going back to that spirit side of the whole being resilience of what is it that you really, really value? What is your purpose for being here? And who is really important to you? Okay. When you go up above into the external world, then if I was to put a camera and watch you, how would I see who or what is important to you? What would you be doing? And so what could you do to act in line with what matters most to you? So you're defining what matters most, and then you're looking at what actions on a regular basis consistently move me towards that. Last April, it was my wife and I's 30th anniversary, and we went to Bali for our anniversary. And we went to a mindfulness retreat. And one of the men there said to me, "What do you attribute to 30 years of marriage?" And initially I was kind of flippant and I said, "Stubbornness." And then I thought about it a little longer and I said, I would say it's three things. One is purpose, two is intentionality, and three is mutuality. What is the purpose for our marriage? Why are we married? What are the intentional actions that I take towards that purpose? And then the mutuality is that my wife and I are both taking intentional action towards our purpose. The mutuality is we agree on the purpose, we agree on the actions that we intentionally take on a regular basis that move us towards that purpose. So this is what's really important on the right side of this, is what you're really defining what's important to you and what you're going to do about it. Over on the left-hand side, the away side, is what moves you away from what's important. And these can be difficult thoughts. These are uncomfortable emotions. This is unhelpful beliefs and stories and labels. So, you know, if you were told you were stupid, okay, then when you start to feel stupid or you feel like something is going to make you look stupid, what do you do? Okay, what is your away move that you would do around that? When you feel unsafe, what do you do? And then that moves you up to the top of that, is what do you do to avoid, find relief from uncomfortable feelings? So we talked about addiction, right? So we have this uncomfortable feeling. Some of the people that I worked with in addiction had a lot of trauma. They had been abused as kids, emotionally, sexually, physically abused. And so to relieve themselves of that hurt, they used substances to relieve that hurt, which then made them feel shame because they gave in to the substance, which then they would use substance to relieve them of the shame, and they would get in this cycle, right, of trying to avoid an emotion and doing things that weren't helpful, and that cycle continued. Zach, I think you had a question.
Just a comment, and it's one of those moments of fear that you're in my head, because I was going to comment about how this framework fits so well within the idea of those process addictions. And then as soon as I raised my hand, like, you addressed it in terms of the process addictions, right? If you think about these four quadrants and really answering some of these questions, like, this is how you can, to Noah's point earlier, like, moving away from those urges, you know, finding that thing that you hold on to that makes staying away from those urges so important, and then that purpose, to your point, right? And then using that as your anchor away from that urge, from, you know, so you're not stuck riding that urge wave. So you're finding that external or internal piece that helps you say, you know what, I've got something better to do with my time than to give in to this urge. So this really fits tightly into that process addiction phase as well. But you were like in my head, because as soon as I raised my hand, you brought it up. So,
and that's a really great point. And the stronger your away move is, the stronger your big why has to be on the towards side, right? And so this is what I would talk to people that I was working with addiction is, why do you want to stay sober? Make that as huge as you can. What is the impact that this has caused on your relationships? What kind of relationships do you want? What kind of an impact has this had on your employment? What kind of employment do you want? What impact has this had on your health? What kind of health do you want? So that they're really, really clear on how this is really sucked on the away side, and really, really what they want on the towards side. So that's a great point, and really reinforcing that with a very, very big why with it. right? And the other thing is guess what their self-identity is if they've been struggling with addiction. If you ask them, and this is one of the things that I have a little bit of a problem with a 12-step program. What do they say in a 12-step program when you introduce yourself?
I think
you label
they
what
say,
your addiction is.
oh.
What's that?
Go for it. I heard someone else.
No, I was just gonna say, I was just trying to think of it, and then sorry, I got thrown off there. But I think they say like one day at a time, like something like that. Like we love you one day at a time, something like that.
But when you introduce yourself, you'd say, "Hi, I'm David Sharp. I'm an alcoholic."
Right.
Oh,
You add that label,
I
right? That identifier.
am an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Right. I would like to say, I am a recovering alcoholic. Because that's a different self-identity than I am an alcoholic. I also talk to my clients who say, I am bipolar. I am schizophrenic. I changed that to, I have them change the wording to, I have a bipolar disorder. I have a schizophrenic disorder. You are not your disorder. You have it. It's a challenge. It's something that you have to work with and develop coping mechanisms about. But it is not your self-identity. Because the more you make it your self-identity, then that becomes your thermostat, right? And do you really want that as your thermostat? I wouldn't want my addiction to be my thermostat. I would like to be that I'm recovering every day. I'm getting a little better. Every day I'm one day sober. You know, I have a client that I've worked with for almost 2 years, and severe trauma and severe addiction. And she said to me the other, like a month ago, she goes, I mowed my lawn and man, I hurt. She goes, but then I realized this is the first time I've mowed my lawn sober in 26 years. And I said, isn't that great? Isn't that great? And so reinforcing with her the recovery aspect of it has been huge to reshape her self-identity and to see the change in her. She just had her anniversary beginning of November as her sober date, and just reinforcing that with her was huge.
Sorry, I'm going to interject one more time. This goes a long way also when you're working with children. Being careful as you talk to your children to make sure that you talk about a behavior. If it's a correction, talk about the action instead of the person. Don't call them lazy. Talk about an action, right? You're acting lazy, you're being lazy, you're not taking responsibility versus you are lazy. That idea of the term is reification, right? Taking an abstract concept and turning it into something concrete becomes really, really detrimental or beneficial depending on how you frame it in the terms of raising children as well. I've seen that both in my adult siblings as well as in my own children. So making sure you're careful with creating those labels for others as well.
That's a great point. And I just went over to my bookshelf and I just brought up this book right here, and it's at the end of the presentation. But Good Inside is a great book. It's around parenting, but it also helps with self-parenting, but it also will help you in parenting your kids. Great book. And Zach, that really leads to the point of, with our kids, we tend to focus up here in the upper with the behavior and not so much down in the internal. And this book is really great at going into the internal with your kids. So you help them to start to experience their internal landscape, right? And I think that's just absolutely critical, and being really careful of the labels that we can potentially give our kids. Now, I don't want anyone out there that's a parent to get super depressed saying, oh crap. I mean, I got my son on this call, right? And I don't want everybody going, oh crap, I sucked. I gave my kid all these terrible labels. Change today going forward, and it can make a huge difference. And there's another thing that is a mitigating factor in parenting, and that is for all of the mistakes you make, being loving can undo so many of those mistakes. If you use inconcise language with your kid, but you are loving and they know that you love them, that can change that for them, right? So loving, unconditional love, as much as you can give that, is a great mitigating factor in all the mistakes that you might make as a parent, right? And that's just one thing that I really try to do with my kids, is to be loving to them. And so my love for them is unconditional. However, my support may be different, right? So sometimes supporting them the way that they would like to be supported isn't the loving thing. So sometimes the loving thing may not feel very supportive to them, and it can feel conditional, but it's really, my love for them is absolutely unconditional. But I will support them in their healthy behaviors. I don't want to support them in unhealthy behaviors. So great point. Thanks, Zach. Next is, I'd like to go over this idea of, we kind of get this backwards. We look at the world as a have, do, be world. If I have money, I will do these things and I will be wealthy, right? And it's really the opposite. This is going back to the idea of self-identity. And it is, who am I as a being? And then as that being, what do I do? And then having is a natural byproduct of the doing. So it's becoming really, really clear on who we are as an individual. This is coming back to our purpose and looking at, what impact do you want your life to have on others? When you imagine your best, most meaningful life, what makes it matter? If your life was a story, what would you want the central theme to be? What pain or challenge have you experienced that you hope to transform into purpose? And then going through your values. And so here's some questions you can go through with your values. Who is important to you in relationships? What qualities do you want others to feel from you? What kind of partner, parent, friend, professional, or human do you want to be? What is important to you? When you are at your best, what are you expressing? What personal strengths do you want to cultivate more fully? And then the third part of this is vividly imagine. When I am living my purpose and values, I experience. When I am living my purpose and values, I do ... Your brain doesn't know the difference between a real experience and a vividly imagined experience. So to change your self-identity, identify your purpose, identify your values, and then vividly imagine yourself living out your self-identity. And that starts to give your brain options. If you look at the Golden Gate Bridge and you see those great big suspension cables, those cables weren't run as one great big cable. They had these trolleys that they ran a wire over, and then they'd run a wire back, and they'd run a wire over, and they'd run a wire back. And that built those great big cables that suspend that bridge. It's the same thing with us. The more you can vividly imagine your self-identity, the more you can align your actions to that self-identity, the more you're running that wire to build that really strong cable of the self-identity that you want to have, instead of that self-identity that you got by default from the programming of others and from the programming that your negative bias in your brain created. So this is your way to take charge of that.
David, that actually really reminds me of a conversation I recently had. And I have this conversation often with people about how you don't need to wait for something to occur to you to then feel that that is now who you are, or to maybe adopt the confidence after something happens. Rather, if you're capable of being that person, be it now and bring it to fruition faster. And so I love what you're talking about. I usually use it in frames of like, hey, you can achieve whatever you want, and don't delay your feeling of success and confidence until you achieve those things. Do it now. And it reminds me of a quote by writer Wallace Wattles on being great today. He says, "Do not merely think that you're going to become great. Think that you are great now. Do not think that you will begin to act in a great way at some future time. Begin now. Do not think that you will act in a great way when you reach a different environment. Act in a great way where you are now. Do not think that you will begin to act in a great way when you begin to deal with great things. Begin to deal in a great way with small things. And I know that's a little bit different of an angle, but I love it because it really does go into like who you are as a person too. Is we shouldn't delay these things with the idea that, hey, well, one day when this happens, I'll be that person. Bring it now, be, do, and have.
Yeah. And this, what you just shared corresponds really well to this. He was talking about the doing part, but implied in that doing is the being. You have to be really, really clear about the being to know that you're doing what aligns with that being, right? And so he didn't necessarily get explicit about the being, but he was really talking about the doing and having that doing being in alignment with the being. So going back and getting really clear on what you want to do. So I did a really difficult, it was an assignment for class. I wouldn't have done this on my own, but I will recommend it to you. And that is talk to your loved ones. I did this. I talked to my loved ones, and if I were to die today, what would they say about me? And then I combined that with my attributes of what I really wanted to be known for. I put their comments and my desires into ChatGPT and told it to write my obituary for 100 when I was 100 years old. And that helped to really clarify to me who I wanted to be. So that was a great way for me to do it. It's difficult. Nobody wants to write their own obituary, right? But it's a great exercise to go through. When I'm 100 years old, this is what I want to be said about me, right? So thanks, Tanner, for adding that.
Of course, thank you.
So this is a framework that I have modified to put together. So it's temper, and a lot of times we think of temper as like people getting angry. And temper is actually, if you look at one of the definitions of temper, it's what we do to metal or glass to change its resiliency and its strength. Okay, so this is how we temper ourselves to become more resilient. And so the first part of it is the away side. So if I were to go back to that model, it's the away side. And then the green part is the towards side. So we're going to look at the away side, and then we're going to change it to go over to the towards. And this is what Zach was talking about, is how do we make that shift over to the towards. So on the away side, you look at what's the trigger. So be curious and explore what others did that triggered this in you, whatever this emotion or whatever it is, whatever you're sensitive to, what was it that triggered that, right? And what are the specific actions or words that they used to set off that inner reaction in you? So it's really looking at what triggered me, what set me off. And then the next part is the emotions. And it's like, what emotions and sensations do you feel, and what is happening in your body? So when you have an emotion, you have the emotion up in your brain, you have a sensation in your body. So let's think about anxiety. So if you were to experience anxiety right now, where would you experience it in your body? So for me, I experience anxiety right in my gut, right? I get kind of this nauseous feeling. I get this tense feeling. So that's how anxiety shows up for me. So I'm really clear on what anxiety shows up for me, because remember I talked about your brain and how your limbic system works much faster than your rational brain. And so it knows the sensation before it names it. It feels anxiety before it can name the anxiety. And so I get really clear on what its bodily sensations are, so that I can identify them even before I may actually give it a name. And then your emotions, there's a covering emotion, and then there's a core emotion. The covering emotion is what shows up first, and it shows up big. So it could be like anger. Anger shows up big, okay? But it's actually a covering emotion. It could be covering hurt. It could be covering a sense of unfairness, a sense of injustice, right? Or anxiety may show up, and it shows up big. But it could be covering fear. And so then you go to the core emotion, which is actually the vulnerable emotion underneath it. And what is it that's underneath that? So it could be like sadness at a loss, or fear of abandonment, or longing for closeness, or it could be shame, or it could be hurt. So we want to get down to what that core emotion is, not just stay at the covering level. And then the M is meaning making. What is it that you tell yourself about yourself, and what do you tell yourself about others? So what is it that you say? So when you're like, let's say that somebody said something and you're angry, and then you figure out, well, I'm hurt. And the meaning you make is, well, when I do things, it's never enough. Okay, so understanding what meaning you're making out of that. And then the P is the protective action. What do you do when you feel angry and you say, I'm not enough? Then do you pull away? Do you, put up your fists and we're going to go to a fight? Look at what your protective action is and how do you cope with it. Then we move over to the toward side, and this is where we go to explore and envision. And this is where we're going to the B side of it. And that is, what is the most generous interpretation of what just happened? Be the most generous in your interpretation of the other person's intent. And then what might be the perception of others be? How might this perceive it differently? I have my hat on. It is what it is, and it is what it is, but sometimes how we see it isn't what it is, right? How we see it is how we are, not how it is. And they're going to see it how they are, not how it is. And so getting in touch with how am I perceiving it versus how are they perceiving it? And then how could I respond from my true self-identity, so true self-image? And then once you're clear on that, then rehearse it. Vividly imagine yourself doing what you would do from your true self-image and your true self-identity. Even if you did it wrong, go back and replay it, redo it, rehearse it. Because again, a vividly imagined experience gets registered in your brain just as if it really happened. So now you're creating an option for your brain to make a decision. Okay, so when something great stay with that experience 10 to 20 seconds. That's a negativity bias. You're balancing that, and then practice regular gratitude. Okay, so I think we're kind of coming up. I've ran a little long, Tanner. So, and I have a couple of more concepts, but we can decide what you'd like to do.
I mean, you're great. I'm really thoroughly enjoying this. If anybody does have to go, you're welcome to do so. No worries. You'll also have the recording to look back at. And if you'd like to stay with us to go through this, you're more than welcome to. David, I'm really eating this up. You're doing a great job. This is extremely informative.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm just going to wrap up with the idea of mindfulness, and there's a lot of ideas out there about what mindfulness is. And what mindfulness is, the way I look at it, is that it's really a noticing. So it's getting in touch with my true self, that confidence, connection, calm, compassion, curiosity, all of that part of me, and then noticing my thoughts, noticing my emotions, noticing my labels, noticing my narratives, and noticing my beliefs. And so instead of saying, I am angry, I am stupid, or I am not enough, I notice I'm having a thought that I'm not enough. I notice that I am having a feeling of anger. So it's the noticing. So again, going back to that importance of the I am statement and moving it to noticing. I am noticing this emotion. I'm noticing this thought. I'm noticing this belief. I'm noticing this label. I'm noticing this story that I tell myself about myself, or the story that I tell myself about others. And that's where mindfulness comes in, is the noticing part. And so mindfulness, coming back to that whole being side of it, it has mind and body and spirit benefits to it. So improved mental processes support better decision making and value-based action. It can reduce the rumination. It can reduce the worry. Remember, we said an emotion is 1 to 2 minutes. So if you can get into a mindfulness, you can cut that rumination off that's triggering the emotion again. A very simple one that I use, and I can do this in a meeting, is I take my fingers and I just rub them gently together just so I can feel the ridges. And I just focus on that feeling of feeling the ridges. That's taken me out of my head. It's taken me into my sensation, and I can do a mini reset. And I can do it in a meeting because I can do it underneath the table and nobody knows I'm doing it, right? So that's a simple one. Breathing is another one. That's one you probably can't do in a meeting, because if suddenly you start taking deep inhales, somebody's going to get a little suspect, right, about what you're doing. But that's one that you can do on your own. Deep inhale, slow exhale. You can do ones that involve your 5 senses. So what do I hear? What do I smell? What do I taste? What do I feel? What do I see? And go through the 5 different senses. Again, that grounds you in your body, gives you a chance to let your brain do a reset. On the brain side, also you get an enhanced prefrontal cortex, the thinking part. You get more brain gray matter. It used to think that we used to think that our brain was set, but we've actually found through neuroplasticity that the brain can change. More brain gray matter. The hippocampus grows. That's where your memory and learning is at. The gray matter, that affects your high-level information processing, your attention, body awareness, helps you to modulate your emotional response. Your amygdala will actually shrink. So for people that have experienced a lot of trauma, their amygdala is bigger than other people's, and it will help to shrink the amygdala, which reduces our stress response. For the body, it activates the parasympathetic system, which lowers our cortisol and our heart rate. It reduces inflammation. It improves our immune function. On the spirit side, we get a deepened sense of meaning and purpose, greater compassion for ourselves and others, inner peace and grounding, connection to our values, faith, or transcendence, and a stronger sense of belonging and wholeness. All right, so one last concept for us, and this is what I would leave you with, is sustainable transformation is rarely dramatic. It is quiet, consistent, and cumulative. So if looking at the chart over here on the left, if you look at performance and arousal, if we have low arousal, we're in our comfort zone, performance is not going to be so wonderful. If we get into that optimal arousal, then that's where our optimal performance zone is. If we move out of that, then we start to get into our panic zone and it gets high. So that's where we can use the arousal window to pay attention. Am I in hypoarousal, hyperarousal? So your hyperarousal is over here to the right. Hypoarousal is over here to the left. It's getting into that optimal arousal window, which will drive your optimal performance. And then also here is another one where it's looking at your capacity and skill and your challenge. And your growth zone is where you are slightly outside. The challenge is slightly outside of your capacity and your skill. If you go too far out of it, it can get really hard for you. When I went and did addiction recovery, really hard for me, way outside, and I had to do some resets with it. So when big changes do work is when the capacity is already high, so your capacity and skill. The change is time limited. It doesn't go on for an extended period. You're out there and then you're back. You're out there and then you're back. And then your external structure and support are strong. So you have the scaffolding for success, okay? And your identity is aligned. This is who I am, right? Otherwise, the small to big sequencing is a lot more reliable. So small changes reduce your cognitive load, maintain your nervous system safety, build self-efficacy, and expand your long-term capacity. So of everything I've talked about, you know, coming back to your self-identity, every day in some way, I'm getting better and better. Programming your self-identity. And then start off small. And here's some ideas that you can incorporate. You know, doing some mindfulness and meditation for 5 to 12 minutes. 12 minutes is optimal. That's where you get the most benefit from it. 12 minutes or more. 5 minutes of intention setting. I wonder what unexpected or magical thing will happen today, and how will I notice my true self today? So you're programming your brain, that reticular activating system. And then do some exercise. Get those myokines, those hope molecules pumping through your body. And then in the evening, do your temper reflection. Do some gratitude, some light body relaxation, and then do some spiritual reflection, surrender, or stillness. That can be how you can wrap up your day. Don't go big. Start small. Grow from there. And then here's some resources that you can look at. I talked about the Good Morning, I Love You from Shauna Shapiro. Aware from Daniel Siegel. He's the one that does the hand brain. Real Happiness is another mindfulness one. Good Inside, that's the parenting book. And then Acceptance, Commitments, Therapy in 7 Weeks is a workbook that will walk you through that framework that I showed you. And then I love Huberman Lab. He is a whole being kind of person. Planet M, she's a neuroscientist that talks about the brain. Peter Attia is also, he's a longevity doctor, but he also does whole being. Headspace is a mindfulness app. Insight Timer is a mindfulness app. And then there's these links down here for you to be able to go and explore your values. So that's everything I have. If you have any questions or comments for me, I can stay and answer however long you'd like.
David, I just want to say I'm kind of blown away after this presentation, and I'm sure a lot of people can share that same sentiment. This has been extremely educational, and it's a topic that the majority of people just don't get the privilege or opportunity to learn about. Sometimes it seems like to take a deep dive, you have to go to a professional and you learn these things on a slow roll, as you're well aware with your own clients, right? But to have an overview of all of this at the same time is so insightful. And I have to say, your presentation style is amazing. Like, you delivered everything perfectly. Your education and knowledge on this subject was top tier. So thank you so much. I will open it up to anybody that has any questions or comments for David to answer.
I don't have any questions or comments, David, but I do just want to say ditto to what Tanner said. I mean, the content was really, I mean, I'm probably one of the older people that are here on this call. You know, married 23 years, 2 children, 1 in college. And, you know, I would just say I lament the fact that, you know, I have to be 51 years old to learn some of what you shared today. But I do find that the value in it moving forward and being able to take a little bit of what I've learned here and, you know, bring it into my own life and hopefully improve myself and the people around me with a little bit of what I learned. So, so very, very gracious.
Thanks, Mike. I'm learning this at 58, so you still got 7 years.
All right, I appreciate that.
And the great thing about this is, and this is what I've told my son, is I don't want him to walk in my shoes and become me. I want him to follow in my footsteps and go much further than I could have ever gone. So if I can take this stuff and learn it at 58 and pass it on to my kids that can take it and go even further with me, awesome. You know, it's all been well worth it. I'm like you. I wish I'd have learned this in my 20s.
Yeah.
But the opportunity that I have now of helping my kids, but also helping so many other people around me is absolutely huge for me.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you.
And as a son, I can attest to that. I'm incredibly grateful for my dad, and for not only the example he set for me to continuously learn, become better, but also that he's provided me resources to show me how, and giving me a good pathway to start that. And it's been amazing to have that in the family as well. So it's really cool to be able to be with my dad where he's sharing that with even more. And I'm always grateful just to keep learning more from him. And I already learned so much from him, and I learned even more today. So thanks, Dad, for what you brought to us today.
Truly my pleasure.
Well, I just want to say thank you. I know that I always talk anytime Dylan talks about you, he, I can attest to Tanner that he always talks highly on you. And just being able to hear, he's telling us about your journey, and you're going to school, and so being able to kind of actually hear from you and being able to see that side is really cool. So I appreciate all the information you shared today.
Thank you.
Anything else from the cadre?
I'll just kind of echo everyone's sentiments. David, thanks so much for taking the time. A lot of effort went into this presentation, and I love your science-based approach to all the nitty-gritty stuff with the neuroscience and everything was incredibly interesting. And I think it's a helpful framework for us to realize that we are kind of beholden to our physiology sometimes, and to understand that's kind of a helpful way to start to fight against it, so to speak, or help it work for us in a way. So really loved everything you presented on, and I'm looking forward to starting some of those mindfulness techniques hopefully this evening. So yeah, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Brad. And it is interesting that our brains will tell us what our limitations are, and it isn't always right. That Peter Attias that I was talking about, he talked about how just like stretching, we will think that we only have so much ability to flexibility. He said, but if you give somebody anesthesia, put them under, you wouldn't believe the things they can do as far as flexibility goes. But when the mind's engaged, it starts to put limitations on our flexibility. When I had heart surgery, everybody wanted to put limitations on me. I had a doctor tell me that I had to quit running. I had people telling me all kinds of stuff about what I could and couldn't do after heart surgery. 8 months after heart surgery, I ran a half marathon. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove to me that was a bunch of crap, and that I could do things and not allow limitations to be put on me, that I could take charge of my programming. So thanks for your comment.
David, what's the best way for us and everyone that watches this recording in the future to connect with you or follow you? Or do you have any socials or websites that we can use as information?
I've started a Facebook page and a Instagram account. Doesn't have anything on it right now, but it's resource. And so I can send that to you. And I can also send you my Gmail account for my counseling and consulting practice.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. I want to make sure that people have that available to them, and can utilize your services as that continues to grow in the future. I assume you are also able to do virtual services like this?
I can do coaching. I can't do counseling.
Okay.
I will only be licensed in the state of Idaho unless they pass what's called an interstate contract. I can't remember what it's called, but at any rate, it allows me to practice in other states through my Idaho license. But right now, I will only be licensed in Idaho, but I can do coaching outside of Idaho.
Incredible. That's great to know. Well, hey, if nothing else, again, you did a stellar job this evening, and you really know your stuff. You really had a positive impact on me, and I'm sure everyone else that attended this tonight is going to feel the same way. So thank you. It was a privilege getting to hear from you. It's a privilege knowing Dylan. He's one of the most important people in my life, and a really dear friend. And now I see where he gets all of his great qualities.
Vice versa.
Yeah, he gets them from his mom.
All right, everybody. I hope you have an amazing night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys.